So, Phyllis, thank you. You're the first person who agreed to do this. So, why don't you go ahead and just tell us what happened and go from there?
How gory do you
As
want?
much as you want.
Okay.
It's whatever you think is necessary to tell the story. I just want to put that out there so people can get an idea for what people have to go through and deal with this, and why people are so frustrated and not particularly upset to see something like Brian Thompson's
No.
demise.
Okay. I'll begin by saying that I was in my mid 40s and I started having issues after yearly visits to my gynecologist. I started having excessive, heavy periods with a lot of cramping and pretty miserable for that time of the month. It just increased as I got older in my late 40s. And my OBGYN and I started talking about a plan of treatment for care. And it was in 2017, and she, thought we should get a approval for a full hysterectomy at that time. And they denied it several times. United Healthcare specifically denied it and requested a plan of treatment that included what's called an ablation. So that's kind of gross because you're fully sedated, you're under the doctor's care, and she was scraping the entire lining of my uterus. What I had was fibrous tumors in my uterus, for lack of a better term. The first ablation, she got as much as she could of that uterine lining, and it helped for maybe a month or two. And then it only got worse from there. That was in 2017. So I started having really frequent periods and extremely heavy. And within about 8 to 10 months, I was back at the OBGYN. Well, I was consistently seeing her about every 2 or 3 months. So I was back with her, and she said, we've done what they've requested. They requested limited care, which was the ablation, to see if it would help, and it did not. So then we started that process of getting a hysterectomy approved. And that was an act of ridiculousness for the first, I believe, 3 to 4 months. Her first request was denied, and she was persistent, as was I. And full disclosure, I actually worked for a insurer in Portland, Oregon. I used to work for Moda Health in customer service
Mm.
for a year, so I knew the whole healthcare game. And they denied it, I believe, 3 times. Every month they denied it.
What was the reason?
They said it wasn't medically necessary, that we hadn't taken all the steps that they'd requested, and it was probably just up to a 3-person medical team in some office saying, no, try some more. And we were at our wits' end, and so I just decided to write them just my response to their constant denials. And I put it very blatantly how difficult my periods were, what I was struggling with, how many feminine care products I was going through in 7 weeks' time, how I was having 2 periods a month, and out of real regular life for 4 days a month. And I just was as vulgar or just as crass as possible, and I had faxed it and emailed it, and then within, I think, maybe 2 or 3 days, I'd gone back to the doctor, and she found out before I did, and she said, I don't know what you did or what you said, but it worked, and they approved your hysterectomy. And we thought we hit the lottery. So
Mm-hmm.
within days, and it had a 90-day time period, so she within days we scheduled, to have a full hysterectomy or just leaving ovaries. So then it was great. She did an amazing job. Full anesthesia. I was in the hospital for one night. Other care providers, anesthesiologists, surgeon's assistants, the hospital bill, the whole 9 yards. And within a month of my surgery, I started getting letters from United Healthcare that they had reversed their approval and then it was no longer approved. And my doctor's office and I had to start the long process of showing to them how you had medically approved this. I had 2 approval codes, which I think is ultimately what happened in the beginning, because I think maybe some desk jockey or someone at a low level appeals coverage. I think that they saw that there were 2 appeals that had been won, and I think they canceled them both out by mistake. I don't know, but no amount of calls, no amount of reasoning with the doctor's office or me, and what's ironic is that United Health fully reimbursed the hospital. They fully reimbursed the anesthesiologist and every other associated costs except the doctor's
Hmm.
surgeon fee. And she had an assistant doctor. So there, how there's two. And it was $5,000, 24.98 each. And they denied it every month. And then in the insurance industry, it's called timely filing, and within about a year, that's when they have time to file claims, and anything after, they'll start just automatically denying anyway.
Hmm.
But they just routinely denied it. And at that time in my life, I was really struggling because I had two parents that were elderly, and I had just gotten one into the care facility, and I had my stepdad just gone off the rails and had just focused all my energy on taking care of my older generation parents and just totally dropped the ball on it. And it went to collections. The doctor sold it to collections, I think, just barely over a year. And within days of sending it to collections, they sued me, or they took me to small claims court. And I was in the middle of a trust issue legally with my parents' trust, and I completely, because it was in within just a matter of a few months, and I just dropped the ball. And when I saw the court filings that the collection agency had done, I just mistakenly assumed it was involving my parents' trust because I had a lot of legal stuff going on with that, and dropped the ball. And so I obviously I didn't answer the suit, and I didn't go to court because I didn't realize I had a court date, and I lost because I was not there. And it's now attached to our home. And that was in 2019 because I'd had it done in 2018, and within just a short period of time, it went to collections in court. And we hired a lawyer 2 years ago to address the issue and reach out to the collections agency to, because I have all the documentation. And it was just such a, we all know they paid pennies on the dollar, and we offered them what we thought was reasonable, and they said no. So I still have it, and our lawyer recommended that we sue the collection agency in small court here in Oregon. And it's just something on my to-do list, but it's always there. They dicked around for a long time with even taking care of my ablation because my doctor started off requesting a hysterectomy. And then it was a time period of about a year and a half. And the interesting information was when they do the surgery, they take all the stuff and send it off to the lab. And she said I'd had one of the worst cases of uterine fibroids that she'd ever seen.
Mm.
So even with all that medical information, they still said it was unnecessary. And also in their letter, they said that I didn't take it, that my doctor didn't do it at a day surgery facility, that she did it at a hospital. So evidently I was to have used, I don't know, the McDonald's of healthcare, and just go to an In and Out to get to have a full
Right.
hysterectomy. So I'm not really, their reasons changed a few times. And it's so fun because I have all the paperwork,
Yeah.
and it'll be a fun deal. But United Healthcare could not be worse, in my opinion. And I have
Yeah.
zero sympathy.
So the ablation, I don't know that word, but
Ablation.
that was not your doctor's idea. That was done because the insurance company told them to do it. So who do you know? Because you said you worked in insurance. Who is it in an insurance company that makes these decisions? Do they have doctors on staff? How does that work? Do you know?
It's funny because I was in medical customer service for Moda Health. So
Mm-hmm.
I worked right next to the department that was getting pre approvals and pre auths. And
Mm-hmm.
I will share truthfully that, in my opinion, it was just people, just ordinary people. They didn't have any medical, or my belief is that they didn't
Mm-hmm.
have a whole lot of medical background. That they were just in the job because they'd been in the job for several years. And I think, let's see, they probably maybe had 8 to 10 of them. And I honestly, at this time now, I believe that they appeal everything. Like they deny
Yeah.
everything. Nothing goes straight through the first time because if you can just deny it and then force people to pay the bills, you're going to do it. They're going to do
Right.
it. Where I was, if it was denied in that small appellate
Right.
place with desk jockeys, then it went up to, they called it a medical board, but it probably included a few doctors and maybe some nurses and then executives. It just depended who would appeal stuff. Also, when I was taking calls, all calls are recorded, and if you misstated a claim or you misstated benefits, would keep those recordings.
I wanted to ask about your comment in the email. What you wrote is, I feel nothing for this man. He didn't get his assassination pre-authorized, so the police and health system should pay zero, deny coverage. Would you like to expand on that? Well, how do you process this whole thing, especially now that the guy's gotten arrested? Some people are saying we're not allowed to be upset, that somehow we're condoning murder because we're upset, we're frustrated with the system. How do you react to that?
My response is I 1000% still think what I wrote in my comment. And the reason, in my opinion, is that, and I think Bernie Sanders is really working on this, and our Senator Ron Wyden has always been on board with better health care for all. You know, when you're in a surgery, I mean, when I worked in medical customer service, it would happen quite frequently that, oh, you'd get a sudden bill because the anesthesiologist wasn't covered and you didn't check your network coverage and you didn't make sure that everybody on the team was in network, and so you'd be faced with a large bill that was unexpected and sucks to be you. So I think that the media is covering his passing, which I do feel bad for his family. I feel terrible for them. Also, I feel terrible for the millions of Americans that United Healthcare screwed. And they've either screwed them by denying claims or not acting when medically necessary. There's thousands of horror stories on TikTok about people that surgeries got held up or cancer treatment wasn't paid or prescriptions weren't paid fairly, which I can also speak to that because that happened to me. I was a pain patient due to a back surgery that I'd had in 2010, so that's a different UHC healthcare nightmare. But I think that United Healthcare it's one time too many, like a bridge too far. And I'm not saying he deserved it, but I don't care. I don't care. And I think a lot of other Americans have had long background of health insurers treating you so terribly. And gosh, let's spread it out to pharmacists, medical people, doctors that don't listen to you. I can't even tell you how hard it was just to get my doctor to listen to me. You go in and you say, oh, I have period pain and I'm really struggling. It probably took about 2 years to get her to listen to me and to get her to actually take action. So with the coverage that I see, but I will be, to be fair, I'm not watching I don't watch CNN anymore. I don't watch MSNBC. I'm not really watching any news. So I think I read about it on my Apple News. Felt nothing. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, he didn't take the time to get it pre-authorized. So, and they do that to people all the time. And I'm not saying about is fair play, but boy, it really sucks to be you right now. And because it's really sad that I think people vote against their own interests as far as their congressional people and their senators, and there are still states that haven't accepted the Obamacare ACA expansion. And when I was in medical customer service, I'm dating myself, but it was 2010, and that was the year that the ACA came out. And I would get calls from people who said, I don't want Obamacare. I don't want that to affect my plan. And I said, frequently, you're calling the wrong person. You need to call your congressperson. This is already legislation that we have to enact. And feel free, if you want to, go ahead and pay in full for your yearly exam and your mammograms and your prostate check. Just write them a check in full because that's what the ACA gives you right now. And it insured kids up to 26 years old, which is amazing. And then they couldn't use pre-existing conditions against you to deny you service. But it could have done so much more. Back when Hillary Clinton was the first lady in 93, her husband, Bill Clinton, the president, put her in charge of solving healthcare. And she almost did, and she could have. And there was so much cynicism on the opposite side of the aisle that it failed. And it's failed miserably for decades for Americans.
And I remember the public option was on until Lieberman killed it, and then he became a Republican after that.
Right. So I think this is wow, what are we talking now? 30 plus years in the making?
Hmm.
And just cynicism is at an all-time high, and it's gonna be even worse. But yeah, I'm like,
I
how
just want to keep the
unfortunate for you to just
momentum.
be walking in the street and get assassinated.
Yeah. I just want to keep the momentum because these news cycles tend to be very short. And
Right.
I think we have to tell these stories to keep the momentum because people can't forget about it. And I hear these pundits on the news saying, oh, it's not going to do anything if a murder isn't going to do anything. But I say, let's not let this guy die in vain, right? Let's have his death mean something. And because, yeah, it's already doing something. The fact that it's causing a national dialogue, but it shouldn't be that way. And the fact that it takes murder for this to happen means the system is demented. People do call it congressman. I have many times. I've been screaming for Medicare for all for 20 years. The system is too powerful. That's what happens. It breaks, and people commit violence. So if you want to stop the violence, do something about the healthcare, I think.
My husband and I were both on TikTok. I got him
Yeah.
addicted. We were just discussing how the French Revolution started because people were so
Yes.
poor
Yes.
and couldn't afford their basic needs. And
Mm-hmm.
if our country isn't as close to that as they were at that time, I don't think there's ever been a time when we're like this. So
Absolutely.
it's an unresolved issue, and people deserve better.
Was this employer insurance you had? That
Yeah.
United
Oh, it was
Healthcare?
really
Yeah.
great too because
Yeah.
at several times when we had United Healthcare, my husband and I worked for the both same company.
Oh.
And at that time, here's a little other inside information. At that time, healthcare, there, I used to work for Boyd Coffee Company, and as did my
Mm-hmm.
husband, and they were called self-insured. So self-insured.
Yeah.
So what they did is they just put in a large pot of money, and then they paid United Healthcare to adjudicate and just pay claims or take care of claims, but it was run by the company, our company,
Sure.
and they could be the ones to. I feel like there were C-suite, is that the C-suite executives that could have very easily said, "Oh, yeah, that's not going to happen," or "That's not going to happen," because they were just a third-party administrator for our benefits at that time, and we were double covered, so it should have been the coup de grace. Like we had everything
Yeah.
available, and we really didn't. Yeah, I was working up until my 50s.
I didn't know that they could deny something after it was approved and already the surgery is completed. But how does that even happen? What was their reason for how is that legal to reverse an approval after the surgery?
You would
Why would that
think
happen?
I I really honestly think it was either a
Hmm.
big clerical error issue or a total. I mean, I'm sort of cynical because John
Hmm.
Grisham, that one book that they just deny everything. I think it was either A or B, just
Yeah.
going back on the coverage. But I mean, for me, they oddly paid the hospital and some of the other bills, but not the doctor. So I don't know. I think I'm cynical enough to believe that they denied, and the weakest link is the doctor because the doctor has to, they pay contracted rates
Hmm.
to get adjudicated, to get payment, and they get a portion of the dollar for contracted rates, and insurance companies constantly lower and
Hmm.
renegotiate and screw them out of everything. The doctor's kind of the weakest link, which is awful because they should be the top of the food chain.
Yeah.
But they reimbursed the hospital, they reimbursed the anesthesiologist, and they took out the person that was easiest, and that was the doctor and myself. And
Yeah.
it doesn't seem to be illegal because they do it all the time.
Yeah. For me, I just want to get across the fact that they're doing this to people with top tier coverage who work full time. Not that people with Medicare should get any worse coverage, they shouldn't, but this is like top of the line coverage. This is happening to everybody. I don't think when Europeans hear about this, they're like, this can't. A few people were saying, just boycott the insurance companies. We can't do that. There's only four of them. You can't. That's like boycotting your own health. We don't have that leverage.
If only we
Anyway,
could. If it were that simple that we could
yeah.
boycott our health insurance, I think everybody probably would,
And
to
it
be
may very
fair.
well be illegal, but they're so powerful, these insurance
Hmm.
companies, and they're being funded by taxpayers. The subsidies are huge to the
Right.
companies.
Oh gosh.
So,
And the lobbyists in Washington, well, here's a little other background information for you. So
mhm.
I was a lifelong volunteer for the PTA. So I was a national advocate for children. And I'm from Oregon, and every year, two of us would go to a national conference for all the PTAs and represent their state. And then one year, I loved legislation. I just loved anything to do with Congress and the Senate. And so I was
Hmm.
the legislative aide that got to go to Washington, and we were actually fighting at that time. That was in 2006. We were fighting for, at that time, they were funding education at 2.2 cents per dollar. And we were on a campaign to boost that up to 5 cents. So we wore big little nickels,
Hmm.
and we met with all of our Congress people and senators, and we did everything that we felt we could. And one of our Congress people that we spoke with just implied and told us the truth. I hate to tell you this, but you're really wasting your time, because we this whole place, that whole place is run on the lobbyists that are less than 2 blocks away, and are
Hmm.
paid to entertain them and buy their votes. And the normal people have very little chance of actually connecting with their congressperson and getting legislation, or affecting legislation. And at that time, I don't know if you remember who David Wu is. He
Hmm.
was one of our state representatives, and he said if we had a flood of people contact us, I would consider bringing a story to the floor of Congress and talking about it on behalf of my constituents. And I asked him, well, what's a flood? I mean, define a flood. So in my mind, I'm thinking thousands of
Yeah.
people. And he said, maybe 11 or 12 people. We were all like, what the fuck? I mean, are
Hmm.
you serious? That it's that little representation, but then they still effectively do nothing because they spend most of their day on the phone to their corporate lobbyists and people and
Wow.
fundraising. They spend more time fundraising than they do actually legislating. Bernie Sanders is right. We need to change how they're funded, how insurance companies are now being taken care of and adjudicated. And now to even read that it gets worse, because one part of the media that I am reading is that United Healthcare has not only bought big pharma, they've gotten a lot of big pharma companies now under their wing. They're buying nursing homes, they're buying end of life care and small hospitals. So they're just going to be a one stop shop for really
Hmm.
shitty care. What
Basically,
will?
for-profit communism. That's
Actually, I
not.
think that's their plan. I think they're just like the Federalist Society, and
Hmm.
they've had a 50-year plan. And I think it was in the Reagan administration, when they took all the small hospitals and cut them, just got rid of them, and so just removed them from everywhere and shut them down in small towns.
Hmm.
Then they started HMOs, managed
Yeah.
care, and they have led us all to this big national slaughter that we're now
Hmm.
dealing with. And they're going to be so big, people have no chance of getting decent care.
And that's one thing I was reading that this killer Luigi said that he said that United Healthcare's market cap has gone up steadily while the life expectancy of Americans has gone down. I mean, that's from
Exactly.
the killer.
Right.
What are you going to do?
But it is
Yeah.
interesting that I did see that they've taken all the public pictures of their CEOs offline and just put the mid-level managers on there. So,
Yeah, they think that's the solution is more
mhm.
security, not change policy, just more
Right.
security. Because what do you think should happen? Like, what do you see? If you could picture a future that makes this situation better, what are you imagining?
I think legislatively they need to do with healthcare what they did to the phone companies. They took AT&T
Yeah.
and they broke them up because it was a monopoly. I don't think they'll do it to
You think,
themselves.
yeah, for me, it's got to be Medicare for all. I don't know how to achieve it, especially with this upcoming administration. If people make a big enough noise, something's going to improve. What do you think?
Right. On TikTok, we abandoned Kellogg's for 3 months. And I think some of it started to work. There was a couple of creators that showed some statistics that it actually they'd see stores where it actually
Hmm.
seemed to be working. And so I think collectively, if we use TikTok together, I think that we could start a pretty big ground campaign
Yeah,
and force change. But they're looking at taking that away too, which is why that's
I
why they
know.
don't I think it isn't in January when they're going to try and take that
Yeah,
away.
only the Supreme Court can save it at this point.
We're going to be in a brand new phase together, and it's not time to stop talking. and
Right.
reaching out to each other. So that's why I responded to your TikTok, because I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I got I have a story. And I didn't know how it compares to other people's stories, because it's really in the game of life. It's gonna probably cost us about $7,500, maybe $10,000 to solve.
But it's also the
And
torment.
yeah,
It's the emotional, it's terrorism, you know? It's just
mm-hmm.
take somebody when they're at
Stochastic
their
terrorism. Yeah,
worst
it is.
and just torture them with this stuff. It's
Mm-hmm.
terrorism. You're terrorizing people, and it's just
They did.
nasty.
I will say that collectively, it made just everyday life and
Mm,
adding to the stress of life with everything else, parenting, parents, taking care of parents, being married, working. It made life pretty miserable. And
yeah.
I'm sure that's what his family's going through. And I don't fucking care.
And you're a hardworking person. Your husband's a hardworking
Mm-hmm.
person. I just want to make it clear to people that hardworking people deserve free health care just like the rest of the world.
You're right.
For I don't know why Americans think that somehow we don't deserve it, that that's socialism. Well,
Yeah.
no, we deserve it. It's part of why we pay taxes. We're just getting ripped off because it's going to for-profit companies. It's going to pay for billionaires, not us.
But they're so uneducated because they
Yeah,
say, oh, my tax dollars would go up. No, they wouldn't, because your tax dollars,
right.
if you were paying for it in taxes, you would be paying
Yeah.
none in healthcare.
It's
So
easy to show that math. It's easy.
it's,
But the good thing
it's
is that this situation, from what I understand, people across the party lines are reacting in the same way.
good.
Republicans are saying, yeah, this is bullshit too. They're like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
fuck this, whatever Brian Thompson guy with it. It's not just Democrats. So this is
Right.
something where there really could be a change if it's bipartisan. They might have to listen to us. They might have to listen to us. I
I'm
think they
going to hope
will.
you're right. I'm kind of cynical.
I am too, because
So
I was sure
I'm just,
Kamala was going to win. So what do I?
you kind of always have to have hope, and
Yeah.
we all have collective hope. My cynicism outweighs that, but like I said, I did help or
Go
try and
involved.
film make with the Harris campaign and talk to everybody. So my hope is eternal too. So I'm gonna join that club with you,
Well, I believe in
and
common sense, and common sense
mm-hmm,
told me that there's no way more people would vote for him now than in 2020 when he
right.
lost, after he's a felon and all this crap. Like, but what do I know again? So who knows? But yeah, maybe people will figure it out with this thing. Well, I don't know.
I agree.
Well, thank you very much, Phyllis. I really appreciate it.
You're so very welcome. Take care.